From global design practice Hassel, this is Hassel Talks. Hi everyone, welcome back to part two of our epic yarn with First Nations consultant, cultural advisor and storyteller Kat Rodwell. I'm Hannah Galloway and I would like to acknowledge and respect the Noongar Whadjuk people and the Wadawurrung people as the original custodians of the land where we record this yarn. We honour elders past, present, and emerging whose knowledge and wisdom has and will ensure the continuation of cultures and traditional practices. So, this is part two. If you haven't listened to part one, I very much recommend that you do. It's a really big conversation about listening and about respect and connection, protocols, engagement, loss, and the experience of voices and country not being listened to for so long. Kat also identified ways we can all help to reduce the overload traditional owner groups and consultants are feeling. So do go back, check it out. If you're already across it, this episode is where we get into the questions our listeners have sent in. There's some really great pointy stuff here. So let's get back into it. So we had a series of questions that we asked through our social media channels before this podcast and recording. And one of the questions was, what do Indigenous people and communities really want to see in our built environment? How do First Nations people want their culture, values, art, and knowledge to be translated into architecture?
I'd say it's genuine cultural, meaningful elements are within the built form, and also elements that contribute to everyone's well-being and health, because the buildings and structures become a part of country, make them live as part of country. And we want them to represent community, not the same for everything. We don't fit into the same round or square hole. We are all different mob, as I said. So don't presume where one group says, oh, we like this, the other group's going to be the same. Make sure it has a connection to country, and it builds curiosity. It doesn't have to be in your face. As I said, is it that you can see country, smell country, feel country, touch country? Those elements. That's all it has to have, and that's all they're asking for. But mainly they want to know, what are you doing on country? What is it you are building on country? How is country going to change? Because once you change country, it affects us deeply. And I always say, plan out the meetings. You probably, with me, I only have probably 4 with the traditional owner groups, the elders, on each project, because I think after that it's too much overload. But we always come with purpose as well, to say, what is it that you really want to know, so that we're not going to, take up too much of their time. Ask questions while you're there. That's why you have facilitators like myself can help that conversation and to draw out what you need to know. But also, you don't have to be that. I call it the IKEA, as I said to you, IKEA. Everyone seems to think you've got to have, all the bits and pieces, all the fang dangle whistles, the kid in the candy store. You don't. Listen to the stories of country. It doesn't have to always have a massive yarning circle. It doesn't always have to have a totem. It doesn't always have to have, an Aboriginal painting or anything. People are still treading on eggshells about, when they're engaging us, what they can and can't do, and they're afraid to do, especially when we design. And I've had a really good conversation last week with a couple of elders on where you call designing with country is going.
And as you say, every conversation and every situation is going to be unique. So never presume that you can have one conversation and reuse that somewhere else. It's when we cannot translate. We are asking for the privilege of hearing these stories and showing respect for receiving the sharing of stories and knowledge. We come up with suggestions and we take those back and we look for approval on the way that we're translating and work through that together. So yeah.
Yeah, and you want to be able to understand it. I mean, for us, people will sometimes what you may hear from an elder or traditional owner is not necessarily what they're saying. So this is where sometimes where people like myself will come in and say, well, actually, this is what the story or the language is what is being shared with you. It's like that great divide in cultures and sometimes language. Does what you build and the narrative, is it easy to understand, or is it so far out there they go, that doesn't look like a Murnong? Murnong's not blue, Murnong's yellow. We need to be able to understand it as well. So it gives respect to culture. We're not asking for a lot, really.
So should we do one of the pointy ones, Kat?
Yeah, come on, let's do it. Yep.
This next question from online, a question about the fetishization of Indigenous culture. The idea that simply because something is rooted in Indigenous culture, that is necessarily good, better, or sustainable. How do we acknowledge a culturally safe way that no culture is ever has ever gotten everything right nor ever will do?
Ooh. I'm looking at the word and really it's saying, oh, well, an unreasonable amount of attention really given to Indigenous culture. And the thing that stands out in this question is I say, well, who says we never got it right? Just because it wasn't written down, we're oral traditionalists. And some may argue, well, we did get it right. We lived in harmony. We were sustainable farming, sustainable living. You know, we looked after country, we nourished country. We only took what we had to until Captain Crook, we call him, and fellow, explorers came along and came onto country and changed country. And then things started to go pear shaped, as you would say it. That's me being nice. So, I mean, we had law, we lived in harmony. And yeah, today, this day and age, maybe we are getting it wrong as a culture in some ways because we've lost our cultural ways, cultural elements from the past that have disappeared. We've lost being part of a community sometimes, being misinformed. People make mistakes. So the question is, how do we acknowledge it in a culturally safe way? Is, well, we walk together, we work together, and that's how we do it. So no one is perfect. There is no expert. We look at the now and how we can resolve or solve things. So when we talk about, our cultural practices, a good example would be we lived off, the land and the waterways, which were, as I said, the giver of life. These days now, because I've lost a lot of that practice, because culture has changed, we now go towards a bit of your way of agriculture.
The next question is, what correlation can we bring between agriculture and native bush agriculture?
Country was our chemist, it was our hospital, it was our supermarket. And it's really funny how it's all being revived. This bush medicine, bush tuck is being used in a lot of ways now. And it's being used in ways of being farmed agriculturally, which is interesting. So that's what I'm saying. The sea asparagus, which is on, I had a note here, Goodnich Mara country, where it's very high in certain vitamins and that. And it said, and it does taste like asparagus. It does. And, you need in the saltwater areas. And now we're starting to farm it westernized ways, an indigenous plant, though, something that we just used to pick from the waterways, etc., that we're farming it sustainably now. So the two cultures are coming together to revive some of our bush medicine, bush tucker, and being able to practice their culture with agriculture and merging them together. So it's using the old ways with the new ways, working with country, with the new climate. And that's what I said, it's not giving it a reasonable attention. We never had the attention. We weren't allowed to practice culture. but now we can. So it's a hard question, but I love it. I love it.
And I suppose that's it feeds into that idea of, it's good sometimes to have hard conversations and discuss things that are confronting, because that's how we understand each other better.
Oh, definitely. As I said, we were told, cutting out, we weren't allowed to say anything. Now we can. So I suppose sometimes some of my people may seem angry or they may seem confrontational, but it's not. It's the passion of saying, well, now our voice is starting to be heard. We want to tell you things. We want to share things, but we also need you to acknowledge the past first. So sustainability, we were fabulous at sustainability. If we weren't, we would never have survived. But we will need to bring some of those practices again to the forefront. And now, so we say with our voice, we need people to listen to us more, how we worked with mother. And it's not designing with country, it's learning with country.
Okay. So another question we've had is, do we lock it in a glass cabinet or let everyone have a paintbrush?
I love this one.
Yes, it's great, isn't it? So it goes on to further sort of say, how do we balance respect for cultural heritage and preservation with enabling an ancient culture to contemporize?
We are not a museum. We do not belong in a museum or behind glass. We are the oldest living culture in the world. It is, as I said before, living cultural heritage. And I say, um, yeah, don't. I'm not saying to give you a paintbrush, but to listen. But we need to grow together on this to still show respect. You want to do immersion into culture and have that experience of the immersion. For to be in a glass cabinet just means you just get to look and probably tap on the glass. For us, the balance is to be able to immerse yourself in that experience. Once again, see, hear, touch, smell. People want to be able to feel our spiritual connection. They want to learn more about the history of our past and our present. So putting in a glass cabinet, no. It just means telling those stories, but at the same time showing respect, preserving them as well. Listen and understanding as we grow together. And we've got to remember, some of these stories may change over time because they evolve when more comes forward. Because as I said, a lot of the times we weren't allowed to share our stories and that. So, for example, in the truth-telling treaty here in Victoria, stories are emerging about the treatment, but more stories are being shared about how we lived, etc., and the culture.
And I think that statement leads into the next question quite well, because there is another question that is posing research or engagement. These may be conflicting. How do you progress the design intent? Is every project case by case? So in other words, through the conversation, we always find potentially, as you were saying, new things and things sort of are brought to the forefront through the engagement. But how does that work when it's conflicting? So
Ooh, okay. Both go together. Let's just give an example of this research. When people want to research something, let's say they go onto Google or whatever, they may say, do Aboriginal people like the colour yellow? So you put that criteria in, and you probably get, yes, they do. And then probably bring up the Aboriginal flag has yellow in it. Do Aboriginal people do dot paintings? Yes, all Aboriginal people do dot paintings, and all these dot paintings will come up. But you get a generalization when you do your research because you're putting in the criteria you want to know. When we do the engagement, we're narrowing it down, getting that first-hand knowledge from the traditional owner, from the elder, from community. So it's like saying you'll find what you want when you do your research, but you'll know more of the truth and add more richness by doing the engagement. Does that sort of narrow it down to?
100%, and I'd sort of explain it as well as a designer. If you're trying to represent place, then yes, you can. I'm in Perth, then you can create a space or something that reflects Perth. But if you engage and you understand exactly that specific place in Perth, and as you were talking earlier about listening and understanding, deeper understanding of that place, and then having the stories that relate specifically to that place, then you're not going to learn that off the internet or research. You need to have those from and it is an oral history, as you noted before. And so without talking and without having these conversations, we're never going to understand the specific nature of the space that we're designing in.
Yeah, so it's case by case. I mean, as I said, I always get, when you talk about artworks, people go, "Kat, can you do a dot painting?" And I go, "If I hear that one more time, I'll do a dot painting on your head in a minute," because it's not relevant to Ngunnawal people. It's not relevant to people in Victoria, where it's more linear lines and things like they talk about, "Oh, you must have this certain gum tree. You've got to have a gum tree here." And you go, "Well, this gum tree did not exist in this place, in this country." Or they'll go, when I go and see people do presentations and they put it to traditional owners, and I go, "I wish I'd saw that first," because they'll put up, a picture of Uluru, and I go, "But we're not there. Uluru's not in Victoria. I'm sorry," you know. Or they'll put what was it, the 12 Apostles? They used to call them piglets or something, and they'll put it in for, let's say, Wadarang or Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, and I go, "That is on someone else's country, Eastern Ma." So it's time, it's place. So we narrow it down and learn stories of this particular place from the traditional owners, elders, and community. Definitely. As I said, research is you type in what you want to hear, what you want to see.
And I think in projects that I've worked on before, it goes down to that level as well, that if you're trying to represent a place, particularly if you're trying to help a connection to that space, if you then bring in stone from China, or you bring in stone from a different country. It could
Mm,
just be, like you say, literally only a few kilometers away, but it's a different country.
yes.
Then you're not enhancing and working with
Mm,
developing a connection to that specific place.
yeah.
Likewise with plants, if you're using native plants, you could be using a native plant, but it could be from the other side of the
Yeah.
country. Uh, and therefore, to be endemic, to be of
Thank you.
place, we need
Yeah.
to be a lot more careful about how we use our native planting to be more specific and more endemic, and looking at how we can kind of incorporate that within our process. And also, like you say, ask if it's all right to use a different stone. Ask if it's okay to bring
Yeah.
sand for, we created a dance circle
Mm,
in a project, a dancing circle for celebration and coming together,
yeah.
and it also formed a bit of a yarning circle as well. And we were looking for the right sand to put in it. We literally got different bags of sand and sent it to our engagement group for them to feel and touch, and we drew a map to say exactly where the
Good.
the sand was coming from, to
Mm,
confirm it was from country. It was from the right country, the right place, and it had the right texture, it had the right feeling. And I think it's about the level that we go to sometimes in trying to engage and create that connection to place and country, but also the respect that we go through that kind of process of
yeah.
even checking the materiality that we're using, sort of thing.
Thank you. That is so important because by you taking a part of country and putting it on someone else's country, you are taking their ancestors off that country, putting them on someone else's country. And this is what we're trying to get you to think about. So it's as simple as that. And when we say, the plants, people go, oh, your native plants. And they go, be aware you have native plants, indigenous plants. So plants that we use as, countries, our chemist, it's our supermarket, it is our university, it is our, Bunnings, etc. We only took from country and used from country because that's our spiritual connection. When you take it to someone else's country, it's hurting us. So someone said to me in the city, well, how do we know, what sort of things? And I go, one of the best things you can do is if you're somewhere where they're doing a big dig excavation, go and have a look. If you can see how deep it is in that, and you can see all the different, you might get to see different ochres, colours of country in that, and what it looks like in that. It gives you a bit of a clue to what to look for as well. And as I said, ask first. We know a lot of now our indigenous plants do not survive on country because of climate change. So we work together where we get hybrids, or something that's similar. Sometimes we say they're a similar colour, but once again, always ask first because it's different for each country and what they expect. But I like how you're saying, please ask about bringing from another country what you bring on country. And we did that for the Werribee, and we sourced boulders from country. And then another project, we asked permission. So that transport, even if you get permission, the transporting should be done respectfully.
Yeah, and it is. It's about asking, having that conversation. There might be a process or a protocol that you can do to
Yes.
transfer. It may be a smoking ceremony in regards to respecting the ancestors from
Thank
one place before it's moved to another,
you.
etc. And we've done that. I've done that on projects, or I haven't done it. I've witnessed it done on projects here when transplanting trees that have just come from one place to another to kind of help that tree reestablish, because you're taking it, as you were describing before, it's rooted in the ground and you're lifting it and you're moving it, and that's that sort of spiritual connection and uh, that ability to bring in a process that sort of aids in the health of that tree, but also the the health in the connection, and the spiritual connection for the traditional owners and the elders that were involved in the project.
Yeah, and have a think about it. Why are you, if you're doing, the in thing now is do an indigenous garden with bush tucker, bush medicine, which is what I do a lot of. But when people ask me to design one for a project, I'm always thinking, what is the purpose of it? Why do you really want one? For educational, fantastic. For the new buzzword, was it I can't even think, it was entertainment with education. And I was going, what? And I'm going, we don't want just to put plants in there for them to die, because that's hurtful. They want to have a purpose. So you don't want to plant like 100 uh, chocolate lilies just because now you get the smell comes every now and then. They go, oh, cool. But to have them die, you're going to put them where you can actually use it. Is there a cafe or a servery that they can actually use it? Is it an educational piece that people will get to see, touch, smell, and even taste it? Don't just bring it on country just as a tick box. Say, look what we've done, a native or an indigenous planting. Make sure it's got purpose. Spend money elsewhere on a community.
And there's so many connections, I think, that we don't even understand that is even a possibility sometimes before you start these conversations. For example, a lot of locations and sites on country are sometimes female or male. You know what I mean? So if you have objects within that space, say for example, I don't know whether it's the same across the different mobs, as you say, language groups or countries. The A women's site here, if you put an emu in that area, would be seen as that's a male symbol and a female location. There are different plants as well that are more associated with women's business, if you like, because they had medicinal purposes for women culturally. So, I think it's about as long as we're having those conversations, those things will be discussed and teased out. And as long as we're sharing our decisions and our processes, and it's about just, even if you don't think it's something that somebody might have an interest in, still talk about it, because you'll suddenly find out that, oh, that thing that was not related to this at all is totally culturally inappropriate because it's a male totem or something within a women's a traditionally women's site.
Exactly. And this is where we're saying where that open dialogue and the question of ask first comes into it. So in these co-design, I say co-decide design meetings, we, in those, ask those questions. Is it okay if we can do this? And if the elders are not too sure, they'll go find out. And that's the whole point of that cultural journey you take with us when we have those, those sessions. But you're bang on about that. People forget women's and men's business and how different elements pertain to, culturally significant women's business, culturally significant men's business, and initiation and everything. And if you really want to be respectful, then you need to know a bit more about what you're putting in there. Is it going to be disrespectful to the culture, to the people? You don't want to do that. So it's just the simplest things. And people just think it's just a tree. No, it's not to us. Or it's just a boulder. No, it's not just to us. So different elements have, and it's in every mob will have something different. Ask.
I've got a couple more questions I'm going to read now. They're taken from, I suppose, more of a perspective of logistics, looking through engagement within a project. The first one I've got here is, how can we make space to meaningfully design with country in the context of a bid or design competition, when often a huge portion of the design is locked in before meaningful engagement with the traditional owners? Or is this asking too much? It seems like it shouldn't be too much to ask for some of our biggest, most important public projects.
Yeah, this comes up a lot, especially when I'm on tenders, and it's hard because, I always say, we need to engage first. How do you design something when you don't even know about, country or protocols or what we can and can't do? And the timeframes within construction and infrastructure are just so out there that there's no room really for proper full-on engagement. So when I'm on a project and it comes to where they've got to put a design in before you even have, contact with traditional owners because you're not allowed to for competition phase, it's being able to engage with people like myself who have been privy to so much beautiful stories and knowledge of different cultures, of different mob around Australia, where we can give you snippets of what we've been told. So it's more like a bit of a background first. So it's like that paint by numbers. So we can give you a few of those numbers to paint in. So we give that design so that the design can be layered once we have that contact, that true traditional owner engagement, so that things can be built within it as well. The storylines can be built within it. Certain changes can be built within it. Because we understand that some of the structure has to already be in the tender before it even goes to traditional owners. We get that. But there's certain things you can add to give it that cultural narrative, to give it that cultural input.
We've also done it in a different way as well, where we've done as an art workshop. So we've invited artists for a workshop scenario, spent a day uh, kind of sharing kind of ideas and talking, coming up with suggestions, so that there's a plethora of opportunities, even if it's not necessarily kind of, you're going to develop it further as you go through the process and the project. But
Yeah, but make sure you're not just throwing it in at the end just for the hell of it. It
no,
has to have.
absolutely.
So, yeah, think about how you can layer your design up from that. And that's where you get you paint by numbers in the end. You go, oh, it's a fruit basket. Good. Now we know what it was supposed to be. And I think and a friend of an architectural friend who said, it seems like it speaks to you. And I go, it does. The building or structure will speak to you what it wants to become because it's part of country. It is a living thing on country. It's an extension of country now. And that's where sometimes people fall over. They just go, nope, it's just a structure, just a building. It's not. So interesting. I like that. It's a good question. And it's really hard for us, people like me, to come in to try to fix some of these things up, because I've come in at a stage where they've put all the plans in and had no engagement whatsoever. And they've gone, oh crap. And I go, it's okay. You've now admitted that, yep, we haven't done it. Let's put that to the past. Let's work out how we can move forward and give some respect to your structure, to your building. And there's always a way. So just don't think, oh, we haven't done it, we're not going to do it. Please still engage.
And the next question we had is very similar. When it comes to listening to Australia's First Nations people and fostering genuine engagement towards advancing reconciliation efforts, the phrase nothing about us without us is important to remember, practice, and embrace. However, this places quite a burden on First Nations people, a big ask for less than 4% of the population. How can non Indigenous listeners better respect the time, energy, culture, and tradition of First Nations people on the journey to voice, treaty, and
Ooh.
truth?
Once again, ask first. Think laterally and in a partnership way. And this is something that always comes through. Um, I suppose not every community will want to participate. We must be respectful. Remember, our knowledge has been lost, and we're starting to regain, retell, and share. When I say not everyone wants to participate, because it brings up the trauma again of the past sometimes, and not all want to engage to share that, because there are some stories and cultural elements that in our culture we don't share, not even with other mob. Sometimes, as you said, we share things with women within our mob, women's business only. Sometimes the men will share men's things with men. So when it comes to how do we respectfully listen and about that raw truth and treaty, give us the time to voice what we want to say, because we haven't had that before, to listen. And as I said, listening is not just with your ears. And sometimes, and you brought up before, it's not going to take 30 minutes to an hour. Sometimes it may take months to really understand and get that truth telling, and the voice and the treaty to come through. We didn't have that, the clock to tell us when. There's time frames. We sat down and it could have been for days, for months till things were resolved. Some things never get resolved. Different mobs, different elders have different experiences to share.
And different sites as well have different impacts, as you were saying earlier, like different association with different, trauma. So, and for one group over another, or for one family over another. So, yeah, respectfully listen and understand that.
And it can be a burden, because I think too many people assume we're going to have those answers for you and have them there and then and now. We're a collective. Not one person makes that one decision. And sometimes it'll go back to the board to discuss. And they might meet till the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And even then, it mightn't be resolved. So then you may have to wait longer.
The next question is it an oversimplification to suggest there is a huge crossover with caring for country and environmentally sustainable design? Or is this an opportunity to leverage already well established sustainability aspirations on projects to broaden to include caring for country?
It's a real big thing. Everything is, every meeting I go to, every tender I'm on, it's like the eggshell fact. Everyone goes, oh, we've got to care for country. How do we put this into our design? How do we put this with the Green Star Indigenous principles or the Green Star rating, caring for country, healing country? Guess what? We really can't heal country because she's too fractured. When we say we cut ourselves by accident and we go, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We either get it stitched up or put a band-aid on it, and after a while they go, look, it's healed. We go, oh yeah, it's back to normal. Can we do that to country now? Sadly, we can't. So we have to look at ways of working with country, our mother, collaborating with our mother, learning from mother, to say this caring for country needs to be more sustainable. Are there projects out there that are being more sustainable and using sustainable practices, meaning working with country? Yes, there are. Yes, there are. They still have a long way to go. You'd say they're trying to work with country, trying to solve some of the issues that we're having, that we're adding to country's woe, so to speak. So we can talk about, simple things such as the use of colour and texture within buildings, within houses, etc. Because colours can sometimes give you that warmth and that cooling effect. We can use different types of materials, but materials that are sourced sustainably. Over here in Victoria, I notice that I always see now a lot of log trucks come through, and I always go, oh, my heart aches, because we must be cutting down so many trees, because I've never seen it before in my travels. And I go, oh, sustainable agriculture. But are we upcycling material? Are we reusing material? You have the use of water, recycled water, rainwater. And I've seen it on a few projects, on a project with HASSELL at the moment, where it's not only a cooling effect, but it also captures the rainwater to make rain gardens. So when you have those big days of rain, it fills up these beautiful rain wells, but also you can have plants in there that, are tolerant to all that. And then when we have days of hardly any rain, it slowly drains out. So it's utilising recycled rainwater, but also using the rainwater's cooling effects. Another big thing some companies and buildings are doing really well is lighting. And this is something that we need to get better at, though, because lighting, we tend to be like, everything's up in lights, so many lights everywhere, and everyone goes, oh, yeah, wow. What you've forgotten is it does affect migration patterns of birds and other wildlife. And they're starting to die out as well because of all this unnatural lighting. Have a think about what can we do to minimise that, to even stop it if possible. Wind, as I said before, we use wind as a cooling effect as well within buildings, within that natural airflow coming through. We use the sun, where we face our buildings, where we face our plant life, where we face people in the building. The sun can play a major role in heating and in natural lighting. And the biggest step I think a lot of people in design are looking at now is the use of the roof space. Whereas, we fly over in Melbourne and other cities and all we see is there's grey buildings and nothing there. Using roof space, using these gardens and using biophilia to act as cooling, to act as heating as well. So, which is what we used to do. We used to use whatever we had around us to keep us warm, but also to reflect the sun. And for one project, I know with HASSELL we did at one train station, is we put in a sort of a biodiversity section up top of the station where it was encouraging the golden sun moth, a new habitat for it because it was dying out. So it's encouraging it to come back. And the bogon moth, which everyone says, what's a bogon moth? And I go, bogon moths come from Ngunnawal country, ACT, comes all the way down to here and all the way into New South Wales. It was a staple dye, and it's been there thousands. They're not like that anymore. So we're saying without the biophilia, without the trees we start to plant in our designs, things start to die out. When you start planting trees and that, you'll probably notice, oh, I can hear a bird. We didn't hear birds before. Oh, wow, we've got cicadas. Oh, we've got the bees. It's great because you're giving them back their homes, their habitat. So maybe when we're designing, what we take from country, we give back as well. So we may not be able to do that within the built form, but somewhere we can then plant more trees, plant more native, more indigenous plants that suit the climate to keep country healing, what you term as healing. So there are great examples out there. Passive House is a really good one to look at. And even just, small architecture firms doing housing and now taking advantage of our ways and how we learned from country, how we lived with country, coexisted, and putting that into their housing now. Living in caves and stuff like that is just phenomenal. But taking those ideas of how nature provided for you, cooled you, heated you, that's what we should be doing. Healing country, what you deem as healing country, does need to be number one at all times. Sustainability needs to be number one at all times. They go together.
Yeah, and that is a whole nother podcast.
Mother is talking to us in so many ways, but once again, we're not listening. So in design, when they say, how do we put caring for country in design, listen to country with every sense, and how do we make it part of country so it works with country? It's not going to damage it any further. What materiality can we use that can be repurposed? For example, one of the projects out here at on the rails south Geelong toward Ponds, unfortunately, some trees had to be cut down. And we go, everyone on that team is fabulous on Geelong Alliance. We say, what can we do, Kat? These are your ancestors. They go, they're not mine, but they're Wadawurrung people. Some of those trees we repurposed and built yarning circles in different areas where people are coming together and they're talking now about things. We hand them back to different areas as natural habitats. They're not just, think about what you're doing before you throw it away.
100%. I'm a great believer in no tree should leave sight.
Thank you. Yes.
It either stays in place or it even, like you say, it's habitat, it's mulched. It then contributes back to the ecosystem of that place and will find its way back into
I
the
love
system.
it. I love it. And as I said, sustainability never was like the Mickey Mouse thing. Now it's so important in all designs. We need to find that has to be number one. How you design, how is it sustainable? How does it keep that heartbeat of country going?
And okay, I think we've got a final question here. So Kat, in your job, you must have lots of challenging conversations, which we have touched upon, how we can have these different conversations. Some of them will be challenging on topics on topics that have the potential to get quite heated, which from my experience, I can say some do. How can you help us and better have these conversations, but also how to have conversations with relatives as well, so that we can take our learnings from you, sort of thing. So there's an older generation out there who have very different understanding and around topics like the voice, which is, a prevalent issue right now and in the forefront of people's minds, and it may be discussed around the dinner table on a Sunday afternoon or whatever. How can we have some of these conversations, and what advice would you give us?
Yeah, courageous conversations. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I was always taught to once always show respect, but truth telling. And people, we always say, our old ways were sitting down where we faced each other and we could talk about anything. You may not get things resolved, but we speak from the heart as well. In my role, I have to try to remain factual, not emotional, because I have a cultural role to play, a business role to play, and sometimes the two headbutt. And it breaks my heart that sometimes I have to think about business before culture because culture is so important to me. When discussing the voice, which comes up a lot, I always say to people, it's like anything new. People fear change when they don't understand it or where they don't have the facts in front of them. So, there's plenty of factual information out there about the voice and what it is. And as I said, I sit back and I go, sometimes it's hard for me to understand because we've never had the opportunity to say how we feel, the opportunity to manage our lives, so to speak, and what's important to us and how it's going to affect us. So, really, you're always going to have people who will put up that barrier. And the only way I see forward is be honest, be truthful, and to be aware that some people are just not going to understand and will not vote based on facts, but on fear. And that's the hard part. And all through the generations, all the different things. The first one, the referendum, 1967, about for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders being able to vote. That was just diabolical. Not all referendums, get a vote. So we were lucky to get that. Before that, we were previously on the flora and fauna list. That's what we were called. We weren't human. But yeah, it's just keeping it open and honest. And as I said, it's a hard one, but maybe direct them to factual information where they can read up and make that informed choice for themselves. But as I said, people have their own opinions; they're entitled to those rights as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I 100% agree in the respect that, yeah, just tell your own truth and you can't always change somebody else's mind.
Yep,
So read the room.
that's been my role time. I mean, you get called a lot. You got to have thick skin in what I do, but at the same time, it's the smallest wins, the barang baluk, which means many footprints. We got many footprints, but one big one can change.
This conversation is also an extension of the journey we are on as part of the reconciliation action plan that we're doing. And part of our commitment to respectfully listen to, learn, and advocate for Australia's First People. So, this has been a wonderful step on that journey as well, having this conversation. I think what some of the things that I've taken from this conversation is truth telling and speaking from the heart, is something you've just said, Kat, and that is so important. And just staying in the room together, just talking and having the conversation. And I know we keep using that term, just keep talking, but it's as simple as that, really, isn't it?
Yep.
There are complexities to it, and do not get me wrong, we all understand that. But the simple takeaway is that we should just keep talking and move forwards together. I would like to make a personal thank you to Kat for your generosity and participation in this incredibly important topic. So thank you.
Pleasure.
And thank you to our listeners, wherever they might be around the world. And thank you for their feedback and all of the questions that they so kindly sent in prior to our conversation today. I'm Hannah Galloway, and you've been listening to an episode of HASSELL Talks. This episode was produced by Prue Vincent and myself in collaboration with HASSELL's Cultural Engagement Working Group, with particular thanks to Rubina Cook, Kirsten Thompson, Adam Davies, and Liam Cridland for their time and guidance.